Good afternoon, happy Sunday, and welcome to yet another exciting episode of Labor Matters. Now, today's topic is one that I'm passionate about because we're dealing with all things salaries. I mean, who wants to work without getting paid? Now, how well do you understand your salary? What does it entail even? Do you even know what a salary is? These and many other questions will be answered in today's episode, so you can tell your friend that Labor Matters has begun. I'm your host, Daisy Mukukamlenga, and to help us dissect various issues relating to labor matters, we do have our usual guest, Mr. Owen Kabanda, and he's going to help us dissect today's topic. Now, Mr. Owen has over 15 years of experience in everything relating to leadership and management roles. He's literally an advisor when it comes to management and leadership as well. Good afternoon, Mr. Kabanda.
Good afternoon, Daisy.
How are you doing?
I'm doing very fine, and how are you doing?
Great. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Okay. So over the past few weeks, I think 2 weeks since we premiered Labor Matters, we've tackled quite different topics surrounding employment, and we're just getting started. And you and I both know that I think one of the topics that has gotten a lot of attention is regarding probation. But I do know after today's topic as well, we will have more questions as well. Because of time, I feel like we shouldn't really dwell on what we talked about the other time. Maybe we can just dive right into today's issue. Then we will be able to also answer some of the questions that came through regarding the episode that aired last week. So without further ado, Mr. Kabanda, maybe let's try and understand what a salary is.
Thank you, Daisy. Yeah, so the issue of a salary, you know that it's been a lot of questions that have actually been coming around salaries. From the time we started, people have really been asking on salaries, when do they get paid, and so on. So we'll try to go through everything regarding salaries today. Hopefully, with the time that we have, we can manage to finish everything. So the first thing, like we have been explaining in other platforms, a salary is composed of a number of things. And in as much as this show we try to help the employees, we will also make sure that we try to focus also on the employers so that there is a clear understanding both from the employee side and the employer side. For the employee, it's important to understand that the salary has components. The components of the salary include the basic pay. Again, this is what we have explained. The basic pay is the amount an employee gets without the allowances. It is a base. In some cases, it's called the base salary. So the basic pay should be understood to be a salary that one will get in a period of a month, for instance, and that does not include the allowances. Now, a salary will also have allowances. Now, these allowances may be housing allowance. So for protected workers, for instance, under the statutory instruments, the protected workers will be entitled to housing allowance at 30% of the basic pay. And that's why it's important to ensure that the salary is broken down. Now, for other groups of employees who are not protected, like the professionals, that percentage is dependent on what the company offers. The rate will be dependent on what the company will offer. Or for those who have collective agreements, the percentage of that housing will be based on what is in the collective agreement. So it's important to understand how these things operate. Then we have transport allowance. This is money that is meant to help the employee to report for work and go back home. So in some cases, that transport allowance is paid, of course, through the salary or the payroll. In other cases, the employer can provide transport. In that case, you find, for instance, we have said this before, where an employer is giving transport, then they don't have to necessarily pay that transport allowance. There is also lunch allowance. Again, this allowance is applicable to protected workers. The lunch allowance is meant, of course, for the employee to buy some lunch, and some they put it as a fixed rate, others it's a percentage of the basic. It depends on how the salary is actually crafted in terms of how the various components that will be there. Now, when you add up this, all the basic and the and the allowances, that is what gives you the full pay or the gross pay. And that gross pay is the one that now you're going to have the deductions being effected on. Now, I must emphasize that there are also times that the salary that one receives in a month, sometimes it fluctuates. For instance, you have your normal usual salary that you receive, but then in certain cases when an employee works for more than the stipulated hours, for instance, in a week, then they are entitled to overtime. So in such a case, you find that the salary might go up than the usual salary that one receives in that particular month. Some companies, they don't pay overtime. What they will do is to do what is called compensatory time off. So instead of paying it as a salary, they will allow you to go and rest and then utilize those days, the hours equivalent that were accrued as overtime. So there are those moments when your salary might fluctuate because of certain payments that are coming. Sometimes it's a payment regarding to commuted leave. So that leave also will be paid through the payroll, and your salary might increase. So there are all these things that one has to watch out for. But after all these things have been put together, the basic and all the allowances, you get the full pay. Now there will be those deductions that will come in for your NAPSA, your NHIMA, and so on. And that is what now, at the end, it gives you what they call the net pay.
Okay, interesting. Now, in case you want to be a part of today's conversation, we do have a number on the screen that you can engage. But we're only accessing text messages, so we're not taking in calls, but you can drop your text message on the number that is showing on the screen right now. If you have any questions regarding today's topic, or if you have a contribution to what we're talking about today, feel free to drop that text message on that number and your concerns will be addressed. Now, Mr. Kabanda, while we are still on the issue to do with salaries, I think one of the questions that other people may have is things to do with salary deductions. At what point does an employer get to deduct one's salary? Also, what guarantees? What is it that qualifies a salary deduction?
Okay, thank you so much. And actually, maybe even before I go into the details of those salary deductions, as I've said, that as an employee, when those the gross salary, there are all these deductions done, what you have walked away with is a net pay. One of the things that we emphasize, even when we do assist different employees and their managers, one of the things we focus on is to help them to also understand that as an employee, try to make a budget on the net pay. Now, we're talking about budgeting. I know it is like a number of people, for instance, when they are starting work, maybe you're from university and you are staying with the parents and they're giving you money and so on. Now, all of a sudden, you have started work and you're staying on your own. All of a sudden, you start realizing that, whoa, there are serious expenses that now you have to take care of. So that's why it's important. If you have received, your salary is 5,000, as an example, or let's just say 3,000 as an example. You need to sit down, because that's your net, which is the take home. You need to sit down and do a small budget, because we see people getting very excited on month end, Zangena, and there is a lot of excitement. But then some people, from that excitement, it leads to now some kind of frustration, because all of a sudden, the people that you owe, your landlord, where you have borrowed, they are now after you. So what we do advise is that please make a budget, and that budget should help you to make, for you to meet your demands. So a good budget, for instance, do a home budget. If you are renting, have a line there which speaks to rent. How much is rent? We've seen some people, somebody is getting 3,000, but they want to stay in a house costing 2,500. Yeah. So which other money are you using? Unless you have other sources of income. So in this particular case, we want to talk about a person whose income is only really coming from this job. So you need to be in a space where you start now making your budget. What is your rent? You put a line there, you write your amount. How much is electricity you're going to spend in a month? How much is for water? how much is for food, how much is so that your food includes your mini meal and all those kind of things, how much will be aligned for the groceries. We see a lot of people, they just say groceries and that's where there's food, that's where there's, but then at the end of the day, your money finishes before the actual month end. So put all those lines there. How much is for talk time? How much is for your transport to work? And also just any other things that you're going to be doing. You put a line there. How much are you spending on other social activities? We see people, you know your salary is, I'll give a simple example of the 73,000. And you are in these 3, 4, 5 groups for this Chiranga, Muliro and other things, and you're contributing 500. What are you doing to yourself? You know. Yeah. So there has to be a point at which you say, no, I can't do this. Even if it is some church programs or family commitments, you have to be in a space where you look at the amount, that net pay we talked about, and say, from this net pay, what can I actually do with it? How do I survive within this? Because if you don't manage the salary very well, it leads to a lot of frustrations. And you find when you're getting paid, the person is already very upset. But with the amount that you are receiving, no matter how small it is, no matter how big it is, it's important to spend a bit of time. And you shouldn't be doing budgets every month end. We see this, how Zangena, you know, like, and then you sit down, you have a small paper. That salary is constant. So if you have a salary which is constant, what that means is that you need to now say, okay, in January, how much am I spending? February, the same thing you do for companies. You have your annual budgets. But I know that sometimes to do that big annual budget is sometimes scary for people. But try to do something small so that you know what you can spend on, when you need to spend on those kind of things. You have some money, for instance, where you want to do your investments or your businesses on the side. So you budget all these things. And when you add up, and I can challenge the viewers actually, tonight if you have not been doing budgets, today go and sit down and do the budget. Sometimes you actually, during these trainings that we do, you find people actually getting scared. Because when they add up things, they actually find that when they add everything, it's actually exceeding the salary. So what that means is that now you have to start seeing, where do I start cutting? So that you reduce on certain expenses, or start finding other ways of making more money. So I thought I should make this clear because it helps at a personal level so that you are not so stressed. And also it helps to start thinking, if your salary is at a certain amount, what then do you do? Either you adjust your lifestyle to fit in that salary, or you start looking for additional means to have more money to meet that lifestyle you want. Key to it is that at the end of the day, it's important that you are in a place where emotionally you're okay. Let not the salary now become a source of stress, especially every month end. I thought I should make that very, very clear.
Very interesting. Now, about the salary, should there be a specific period when employees should expect their salary, or it's okay for them to just sit and just whenever the money will come in, the money will come in? So maybe from the angle of the employee, you can comment on that. And also from a perspective of an employer, you can equally comment on that, on how long a salary should take before it lands in people's accounts. Because people get frustrated and work becomes affected.
That's very true. So the law is very clear around how much the salaries should be paid, as well as when those salaries should be paid. When it comes to the period of paying a salary, for the people that are on contracts for a month, the salary usually is required that it is paid at the month end or in a month's time. The key issue that needs to be made very clear is that the law requires that the salary is paid at such regular intervals as agreed, okay? And the law will provide even for an additional 5 days if you go past that regular interval. Now, you'll notice I'm using the word regular interval. I'm not saying on the 30th. What that means is that if in your company you have agreed that the salaries will be paid on the 15th, then it will be paid on the 15th. If it is on the 21st, then it will be on that 21st. But usually in many companies, the contracts or conditions of service will stipulate that it will be paid at the month end, though the employer might actually choose a day to pay earlier to allow them to do the payroll reconciliations and everything to do with the remittances to the various statutory institutions. So it is important that the salaries for those who are doing monthly jobs, they are paid on such dates. For those who are on works which are, and the contract allows that, provides that the person is paid when they do a delivery, let's say they have to undertake trips and deliver things. If the contract is crafted as such, then the person, when they return, they have to be paid. For those who are doing pieceworks, usually the payment should be made within the same day, so you finish your piecework, it is paid. But the law also allows that you can actually agree with that person, and then you accumulate up to a month and pay everything at the month. But there has to be some record to show what this person is actually supposed to get on a daily basis, then accumulating to be paid at the month end. So in terms of the period of payment, that is what is provided. Now, I know, and when we talk to business owners and HR practitioners, that on the ground there, practically sometimes things might be, there might be challenges where the employer fails to find the necessary amounts of funds or finances to pay employees on those regular intervals. What is key is that there should be some form of communication, because remember, and this is what we said to employers, employees also have commitments. The fact that this employee is getting a particular amount of salary, maybe they have also loans, they have people that they have promised. Some, they even do those bank transactions where you have written to the bank that on such and such a day, the bank will deduct from your account. So then you find that there will be no money in the account. So it's important that there is communication between employers and employees. Things do happen. It's not always that the business will have money, but again, it cannot be a situation where the employer takes a stance and says, I'll pay you whenever I'll pay you. There has to be some form of communication to make the employee also understand that the business is having some challenges, and then you make it clear when really the employees can expect the payment, so that they also make their own adjustment. It's just a good practice, so that you don't have unnecessary work stoppages, because there are cases where when the employees feel that they are not being heard, now they start. Remember, salaries are it's a very sensitive issue. Because the person has worked, and once they work, they should be paid. The members say, "Mumpere kweshandi." So once the person has worked, all that they are looking for is to be paid. So if they are not getting paid, then they have to be engaged so that they really understand what is really going on. At the same time, it's important also for the employers also to make employees understand, coming to that question you're asking even about the deductions, that really from the beginning, the employee should know how the deductions will be made. Now, I'm saying this if for the companies that are dealing with people who are professionals and they are highly educated, usually giving them just a contract, they will read on their own, they understand. If there is anything that they want to be clarified, that can be clarified. But as you deal with the certain levels of employees, also maybe you can be in a place where employees, maybe they have not had a lot of education, and you need to be in a space where you spend time to explain to them what exactly will this salary be and what will be the deductions. So when it comes to the deductions on the salaries, because I know that there's a lot of questions around these matters, there are what we call statutory deductions. The statutory deductions are deductions that by law the employer is mandated to effect on the employee's salary. What that means is that the employer doesn't have to come and ask you. It's not a discussion. We see this in various groups where some employees will say, no, don't deduct my NAPSA. I don't intend to come and make any claim. But it's not a discussion. When it is given by law, that's why is the statutory deduction. So some of the statutory deductions that are there is deduction for NAPSA. So the employer will deduct a percentage of the employee's gross pay and contribute that towards NAPSA, and the employer will also match. So if the employer deducts 100 kwacha from the employee, the employer also put 100 kwacha, and the 200 is now remitted to NAPSA before the 10th. Then the other one, and again, talking about these deductions, especially on NAPSA, we have also received a number of messages for those that are now struggling to access the 20% partial withdrawal. Again, that is an issue that is in-house, the employees and employers need to discuss. Then an employer needs to go to NAPSA. NAPSA, they are assisting employers to normalize things. And then see if there are penalties that are there. They will enter into some payment plans. And what is key is that the employer and NAPSA, the employer has to go and normalize things and just get things done. So on the issue of NAPSA, it's a statutory deduction. And we know we had some training with some employees, and the employee says, no, but during probation, you can't deduct my NAPSA. No, it doesn't work like that. It's from the beginning. So the same applies to NHIMA. This is for health. Again, the employer will deduct from the basic pay. Remember, we said there's a breakdown on the component of the salary. The employer will deduct an amount, and they will also match it. And at the end of the month, or before the 10th, they will also remit that amount to NHIMA. This is for purposes of covering the employee's sickness, and the employer will also make arrangements with NHIMA to make sure that the employees they are registered there and they can access health services. There is also the pay-as-you-earn, which we have talked about in other platforms. Pay-as-you-earn is paid to ZRA. It's from your income taxes. So that amount that will be deducted, if you are earning anything more than 4,800, the pay-as-you-earn will kick in. And that amount now is taken to ZRA at the end of the month. But that one, the employer is not matching. The employer will be made to pay the skills levy, which is deducted on the gross pay of all the employees, and the employer will pay to ZRA. But on the part of the employee, there's also personal levy that gets to be deducted. Now, personal levy is paid to the council in the jurisdiction where the employee is working. I know that some people say, but we are not benefiting anything from the council, but that's the law. It's only 15 kwacha. So some employers will pay 7 kwacha 15 kwe in the first half of the year, and then 7 kwacha 15 kwe in the other half. So the key issue is to understand as an employee that there will be these deductions, like we said, which from your gross, if you had the 10,000 gross, when you added up the basic housing, transport, and all those, you ended up with a gross of 10,000 as an example. You find that maybe your net pay will be around 6,700 or whatever amount you have to do the calculations. So that will be your net. So it's important to understand that there are these statutory deductions that will be affected, and the employer does not need to come and have an agreement with the employee. But there are also other deductions that are allowable under the law. The other deductions that are allowable, for instance, if you as an employee, you went to the employer and you asked for a salary advance, you will be given forms to sign. So that form will have terms that will dictate how much the salary will be deducted, as well as the period. So if your salary advance should be paid within 3 months, then it has to be paid within 3 months. If you can also have loans. So the salary advances and loans, those the employee and the employer are entering into an agreement. What that means is that you, as an employee, you went and requested for funds from the employer, and then you have entered into this agreement. The employer also should not, and we have to emphasize this especially to HR practitioners. Sometimes you find the business has some challenges, and then they say, no, but maybe we should deduct more from those who got advances. It cannot be done like that. You have to follow the agreement. Yeah. So that is what happens on those advances and salaries, there is an agreement between the employee and the employer. The other deductions that are also done are deductions which are coming as a result of, for instance, things like shortages. So if you are working in a place where you are handling money and then there is a shortage, that shortage can be deducted. Now we have to make something very clear here, and this is for HR practitioners and business owners. For shortages, there are two things involved here. There's a shortage, there's a deduction. But between the shortage and the deduction, there's something here in between, which is a disciplinary process. So we know, especially in certain places where once there's a shortage, or that the business owner will say, oh, there's a shortage of 300, deduct. No. It cannot be like that. The law requires that this employee who is suspected to have caused the shortage is taken through a disciplinary process. So do the investigation as an employer, determine that indeed, establish that indeed there was something wrong that happened here, and then the employee should be charged. Okay? And when the employee is charged, they are taken through the disciplinary process, and when they are found guilty, and the penalty is that they should pay the amounts that are not adding up, then the employee will be found guilty and they are written to, and then that deduction is now effected. So there has to be this disciplinary process in between the shortage and the deduction. It's not a matter of just waking up and saying, deduct. No. Also the employee, if it's why we are saying there has to be this process, and the employee being found guilty. The employee also, it's not always that you have to deduct. Maybe the employee doesn't want a deduction. They are free also to go and find money anywhere and come and pay you that shortage. It can also happen like that. The other deduction that can be effected is a deduction caused by breakages to company properties. If there is something that has happened, you are entrusted with a certain equipment or asset of the company, and now that equipment, you neglected your job and it's broken, or there's something that has happened to it. Again, it's not a matter of just waking up and saying deduct. Just like the shortages, in this particular case, it is a requirement that the employee is charged and they go through the disciplinary process, and then from there, you are now determining that this person should pay the amounts that are due and payable, and then that gets to happen. The last deduction we can talk about is really a deduction which comes as a result of overpayment of a salary. We know sometimes if your salary is 3,000 as an example, and then the employer made a mistake and they pay you 6,000.
That would be nice.
and that happens a lot, especially when companies are dealing with a lot of employees. Sometimes just from the accounting side, they make mistakes. Now, for employees, it is Zangena. It's Christmas. Yeah. Now, all of a sudden, you want to be a big buyer. You want to be that. What you need to understand is that is not your money. The employer is going to deduct that amount. So, if you're an employee and you receive more money than you should be receiving, you should immediately talk to the employer. I know people say, no, but it wasn't my mistake. I'm not the employer. Of course, it is not your mistake. What the employer will simply do, which is actually painful, they can basically, in the next payroll, they will pay and cancel that payment and deduct the amounts. But again, it becomes a painful and unnecessary discussion. That's why it's important to come forward. What normally would happen is that the employee can withdraw that money and deposit in the bank account of the employer, and they get a receipt and it's closed. Or you say, well, I'm going to use this money, then you start deducting. Again, you have to now sign some form of agreements. So don't become a big buyer on an overpayment. The employer has a right to deduct those payments.
To deduct, okay. And we do have a few messages that have come through. Maybe in the interest of time, let me see if I can read some. So let's see. Okay, so there's this one who he has written his names, but then he's saying, please don't mention my name,
Please.
right? So let me ensure that I don't mention his names. Um, let's see. So he's saying, I have been following this program called Labor Matters for quite some time. Now, the issue is that I'm currently working for Comaco and Java Foods as a merchandiser. So what it is that we signed a contract with the two companies, and the contract says we are not employed by the same two companies, but just rendering services to them. So we have a union representing us called Merchandisers Union of Zambia. This union reported our two companies at the Ministry of Labor, and the ministry called our companies to explain what kind of contract it is. And according to them, they said we are subcontracted, and the ministry advised the union to find out if no merchandisers were fired before. So looking at things, we are going through things are tough. The money we are getting is 900 kwacha per company, which is not enough. We are also told to send Google location when reporting for work, and also we're knocking off as well as sending photos of our stock and stock report. And looking at the way we work, it's just the same as those merchandisers who are fully employed, though us, we are getting almost nothing. So what is your advice on this issue? Maybe before I read another one, maybe you can respond to this one.
All right, so that is a pure case of something that we've talked about before in terms of the type of contracts. Is it a contract for service or a contract of service that is existing? So it's a case that needs to be looked into, and we'll follow up on the matter and see how those kind of people can be better helped. But it's important to understand when you are starting employment and you are being sent to another company, this is something we have explained, that your company will sign a contract for service with the other company. In as much as you are put to work in there, you are not necessarily an employee of that other company. So it's important also, this is why we say companies and business owners need to make things very clear in terms of what the employment relationship that are entering into with the employees, so that the employees understand. And also it's important to explain to employees the salaries that are being paid. How much is this salary and on what basis? Is it in line with the law? Yeah. Is it above the law? And those kind of things. So it's a matter of communication and making sure that the parties understand what is really at play. But those are things that can be done off air.
I think it should be followed up, because truth be told, most companies in Zambia especially, they pretty much steal from employees, especially when they lack information. So maybe looking into it would be the best thing. Then we have another message from John, who's in Pika. He's saying, sir, we work under Shaz. As counselors, we have worked for more than 18 years. We are given 600 kwacha per month. No NAPSA is deducted. We are even older now. How are we going to survive? So I'm not sure if that's a question or if it's a contribution, but yeah. Kennedy from John Lang says, Nari Womba for 3 years, but company Tailetwa NPS. Is that NAPSA?
Yes, that's before NAPSA.
Okay. Kuti Tashan. Okay. Coach Tashan. That's from Kennedy John Lang. Okay, so I think you understand this.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, so for, again, these are issues like I mentioned about this 20% NAPSA withdrawal. It has actually led to a lot of movement in the labor market. What is key is really to follow up both with the employer and NPF or NAPSA itself, so that they look at the records and see a number of companies actually being helped. It's not a matter of running away, it's a matter of going to NAPSA as an employer and saying, how then do we normalize things? So that was the key word there, was normalizing the situation. Yeah.
Okay, we have 5 minutes to wrap up. So maybe we can also talk about, does an employer have the right to dictate how an employee should use their salary? Or, as you answer that, also answer to the fact if a salary can be given to somebody else.
Well, again, it is important, again, especially for the HR practitioners and those people who are dealing with the payrolls or business owners, that it's important to separate what the law says from our beliefs and practices and what we want to do. There are times that you're operating as an HR, for instance, and then there is this employee who doesn't take money home. And you really want to help the family. But again, you cannot start dictating where the employee spends the money. So in terms of paying another person, the law is very clear that you can only pay another person when the employee puts it in writing that this is a person, and that is only in the absence of the employee. It's not just even when the person is there. Let's say for our colleagues who do tracking, they go into other countries, or if you're not going to be there, you can authorize that pay this amount into this account. Now, the law again is very clear that the employer cannot dictate what the employee spends on. You cannot even be seen to try to tell the employee what they spend on. Now, this I know that but there's a lot of debates we have, especially from the HR field. It's not a matter of your convictions. Okay, if there is a person who, for instance, is seen to be so-called irresponsible, the family is suffering, or the landlord is coming and they are making noise, that person should actually be charged for another offense. Okay, it's not that they are not taking money home, or they are not responsible for this. We have all these social problems we deal with, especially in the HR field. Somebody has 3, 4, 5 wives, they are not taking money, or they borrowed somewhere. Again, it's a matter of sitting down that kind of person, explaining to them what could actually happen. They could be charged for the damage they're causing to the reputation of the company, actually. That would be an offense that they can have. But to tell them what to do, it should be the employee really willingly saying, okay, pay this one. But the employer should really not be involved in the business of managing the employee's finances. Also, sometimes the employer can pay another person when there's a court ruling. Okay. Because when there's a court ruling, the court has now directed that such and such amounts be paid to such and such a person. So it is only in those circumstances. Otherwise, what is key, like we said even at the beginning in terms of budgeting, where you see an employee struggling here and there, talk to them. It's important to advise them to see how best they can do things, but do not impose your views on an employee. They should make their own decisions around how they utilize their funds. Yeah,
and besides, it's their life. So if there's any sort of irresponsibility, they should sort it out.
Exactly.
Yeah. I know we're running out of time, but I would really love it if you answered this question. Now, there have been a lot of complaints from most employees on them receiving little amounts of salaries despite working very hard. Now, how much should an employee be getting?
Well, this is how much is always a very debatable issue. I know it's a very hot issue. The amount of salary one can get, first of all, split the employees into 2 groups. There are those groups of employees that we call protected employees. These are employees who are like the general workers, the shop workers, your secretaries, the drivers, and so on. So those, there is a law called the minimum wage. So the minimum wage and the statutory instruments that are issued from time to time, like from SI 71, 69, and so on from 2018, the salaries are stipulated there. Okay, so you have a general worker, for instance, getting the amounts that are stipulated in there, about 1,690 something gross. You can actually round it off to about 1,700 as gross, but that is if you are not, if they are not getting transport and lunch and so on. So if they are paying everything, it will come to about a gross of 1,700. But again, it's so important to understand that in some sectors like agriculture, you have the farmers union, they discuss certain salaries that will apply. But generally, you have the laws on minimum wage that pertain to the workers generally, and then we have the shop workers, the law that pertains to the shop workers, and the salaries are set. Again, these are things that people can even download and start reading on their own. Then there is a law on minimum wages pertaining to domestic workers. There is an amount that you have to pay your domestic worker. So again, these are available on the internet or anywhere. You can just download or go to the Ministry of Labor. It is important that you as an employee understand, but also the employers understand how much they are supposed to pay. Those groups of people are protected. The other group is unprotected workers. Those are professionals, for instance. If you went to school or university, the understanding of the law there is that you are going to negotiate your salary. So usually the company will have its own salary structures. They will put how much they have to be paid, be 5,000 or 6,000, whatever amount. That group cannot necessarily use the minimum wages. The expectation is that those salaries will be negotiated if you are in a group that is not a protected group. But also for those that have unions, as we said, the salaries will be negotiated by the unions. But most importantly, they should not be below the minimum wage.
Okay. And you know the problem that some of our viewers have, they get to wait until we run out of time, and then now messages just start coming back and forth. Maybe these are messages that you can respond to later, but I would love to read them just so their bosses are aware that we know that they're doing something wrong. So this one says, an electrician at a certain company here in Copperbelt at Chambeshi. This company has no salary scale. You will find that a technician, engineer, electrician, operators, welders, helpers, and the like all get the same salary. Why? And then this one says, I won't mention my name. I work under Verono Agro Industries, Chongo area along Great East Road. Help us about working conditions from 0530 hours up to 20 to 21 hours without overtime. Please help us. We work like slaves and we only get 1,700 kwacha. All right. So I think the rest of the questions and comments, we can tackle them away from the set because we've run out of time, but we'll try and make sure that as we start the program next week, maybe you can highlight which ones should really be brought to light, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, okay, so we need to wind up because we're already in another program. So maybe do you have any final words?
Really, just to thank the viewers, those who have been following us, and also the feedback on this program. Also, the ones who send questions. It's interesting to see the various things that people are going through. We'll try and see how they can be assisted. For those that would like to follow us, they can follow us on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on TikTok. Just search for Owen K. Kabanda, and you should be able to find a lot of other materials on NHIMA resource. Okay.
Well, Mr. Kabanda, it's always a pleasure just getting an idea or a fraction of your knowledge regarding labor matters. I feel like we should prolong this conversation to 2 hours instead of 1 hour because your message is fully booked now. And on that note, we've come to the end of today's episode of Labor Matters. I hope that you have started understanding your salaries better. And with that said, do join us next week. Again, we have another interesting topic. Now, for those of you whose messages I haven't yet read, please don't dispel because we will be responding to those off camera and we'll be able to also highlight them first thing even as we start the show next week. I'm your host, Daisy, and I've been with Mr. Kabanda, and up next is we have a show from Conrad, and that's Rumor Has It. So please do stay tuned to KBN TV.